Good morning, Unity of Charlotte.
Good morning.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Marty Bacher, and it's my privilege to welcome you here this beautiful day. Delighted that we can share in spiritual community. We're here to nurture a deep and abiding experience of the divine through the practice of unity principles. Simply put, we're here to love and to grow and to serve, and so we're grateful that you're here to celebrate with us today. We are a spiritual community that celebrates a way of life that believes that God is immanent and present and within us, and that as we discover those already given gifts, our lives are more full and fulfilling. So if you are visiting us for the first time today, we just want to say welcome. We hope you'll avail yourself of the opportunities. I hope we received a guest packet and people were nice to you. If they're not, talk to me. I'll have a word. They can be really tough, that group that greets you, if you noticed. We also, if you're in need of prayer today, we have our Ministry of Prayer always available. Prayer request forms can be completed in the lobby, as well as you can complete those online. As you know, we're reformulating all of our compassionate care ministries, and it's just very exciting. It's always a privilege to hold that spiritual truth with you. So many wonderful things going on in our church. So today, we have our wonderful guest speaker, Gregg Levoy. I'll tell you a little bit more about him. So he's going to speaking. You're going to love him. And then he's doing a workshop at 12:30. So for those staying for the workshop, we have a lunch set up in the Innes room. And can I just say, I made soup. I don't know how good the workshop will be, but the soup I can attest to. So, no, it's going to be great. We're just delighted. As I said, I'll tell you more about Gregg in a minute, but we're delighted to have him here today. I invite you to simply breathe into this moment, allowing yourself with each breath to become present and available for the Spirit of God within. With each breath, we breathe in love and joy and harmony and peace. And with each out-breath, we release anything unlike it. How grateful I am to be together in this moment as we open our hearts to the presence of divine love, our minds to divine wisdom. And we know that we are lovingly guided on our journey of life. So grateful for this time together to be in spiritual community, to be uplifted, to be inspired through the song sung, the word spoken. And so how grateful I am that this time we have together reminds us of the truth of who we are, that we are spiritual beings housed in human form, experiencing this wonderful thing we call life. So grateful for the many hands and hearts that come together each Sunday to provide this service, to provide this place, to serve this community. And so I know that the day is already divinely ordained, that we are blessed beyond measure. And so I'm giving thanks for all of these blessings and so many more as I release this word, knowing through the power of the living Christ we are blessed. Together we say, and so it is. Amen.
source. God is my power.
Everything I need.
So I give thanks for all my blessings.
Gives me everything I need.
You see what happens to me when I have to
How we identify new people. So now they're all comfortably standing. Let us speak these words of truth, our October affirmation. Today, I courageously choose to prosper. I lovingly and gently release the past. I freely forgive myself and others. I joyously participate in the divine flow. Today, I courageously choose to prosper. And so we are delighted to welcome to the stage our sweet, sweet Susan Caney, who's just such a blessing in so many ways to this community.
I do want to say to you that this isn't one of those big, loud, powerful songs, and it's just the opposite, in fact. It's almost a prayer, and it definitely can be felt as a meditation. So what I'd like you to do is just close your eyes, listen, take in the words that you're hearing, and let it just come into your being, and let your abundance be now. I celebrate my abundance today. By giving this gift, I show my faith. As I open my heart, my world becomes a better place. I release all fear as I share gratefully. This love that I give always gives back to me. Knowing my oneness with everything else, I know that all that I give to myself. By giving this gift, I show my faith. As I open my heart, my world becomes a better place. As I share gratefully, this love that I give always gives back to me. Knowing my oneness with everything else, I know that all that I give to myself. I celebrate my abundance today. By giving this gift, I show my faith. As I open my heart, my world becomes a better place. I release all fear as I share gratefully. This love that I give always gives back to me. Knowing my oneness with everything else, I know that I give to myself. Oh,
So, one last thing. Told you all his high achievements, but I just wanted to personally say thank you, Gregg. Your book found its way into my life at a point when I'd responded to the calling but didn't know how to do it authentically. And it served me in ways that I can't even begin to thank you, and from time to time it pops off my shelf to remind me. So please welcome Gregg Levoy.
So I'm delighted to be here at the culmination of my career. I noticed the gentleman in the front has an umbrella. I just want to point out, I moved recently from Asheville out to California. And seeing an umbrella again reminds me that I'm now living in a place that doesn't rain from April to November. So it's like, oh, it rains in places. It rains. All right, so I think I'm going to jump right in. As Marty mentioned, I used to be a reporter for, among other newspapers, the USA Today in Washington, D.C. And frankly, this looks great on my resume, but the truth of the matter is it was a lousy match. It was a lousy match because I'm essentially a feature writer, okay, as opposed to a news writer. If you know USA Today, I used to work for the purple section, okay? This is the life and entertainment section. And when USA Today was first born, the Washington Post reviewed it the way you might review a movie or a book or something. And they referred to it as News McNuggets. Okay? Especially in the beginning when they had an editorial rule that no story could be continued on another page. So they were taking my long stylistic features and chopping them to bits. And I refused to admit that I was unhappy there for a really long time because I wanted to be a journalist in Washington, D.C., even a miserably unhappy one. And some of the signs and signals that I wasn't paying attention to while I was at the newspaper included my inability to stay awake at that job. Literally, my colleagues would find me with some regularity fast asleep at my desk, with my head propped up on a stack of books that I was using as a pillow. And what am I doing by literally falling asleep on the job? All right, I'm reenacting an age-old story, which is the story of Jonah. Okay, I love this guy. He's like the patron saint of refused callings. And the way that it works is that he gets a calling essentially to be a public speaker and wants no part of it. Books himself passage on a ship heading in the exact geographically opposite direction from where he's called to be, and then goes to sleep in the bottom of the boat. Right? So this is a state that psychologists tend to refer to as denial. And interesting, I'm probably reading too much into this, but the part of the boat that he went to sleep in is referred to as the hold. Just saying. So some of the other signals that I was ignoring while I was there included my dreams. I mean night dreams, not daydreams. Okay? So I have kept dream journals since high school. And while I was at the newspaper, I continued to record them, as I always had, but very uncharacteristically, I spent no time trying to interpret those dreams. Because I think at some level, I didn't really want to know what they had to tell me. Which is probably just another way of saying I knew what they had to tell me, right? And, you know, frankly, they were just bursting at the seams with information about how I actually felt about being at that job. Trading off passion for security and prestige. Okay? I had a dream of somebody handing me a stack of $100 bills, and I put them in a trench coat, and I took them back to my apartment, and I opened it up on the kitchen table to discover that only the top bill was a 100. All the rest were ones, and I'd been cheated. All right? I had a dream of losing my wallet with all of my identification cards in it, my sense of identity. I had a dream of finding a golden calf. I mean, hello? What is that? This is what the Israelites were worshiping before God pitched a fit, and represents the pursuit of shallow materialism. All right? I had a dream of being invited to the boss's fancy pool party, but the pool was empty. So when I looked back, dozens of dreams like that. Not exactly rocket science. Okay? But I had to be willing to connect the dots, which is what I was not willing to do at the time. And another set of signals that life was sending me that I was ignoring. And anybody will recognize this if they've ever been in a job or even a career that they don't really like. It's a bad match for their spirits and their gifts. I was engaged in a whole bunch of behaviors like coming into work late, leaving work early, extra long lunches, talking to friends in Hawaii on company time. Just constant, just clock watching and indiscriminate wastes of supplies and sick days that I came back from with a tan. Little paid vacations my company wasn't aware it was giving me. All right. And here's the thing. The loss of that job, it's the one and only job I have ever been fired from, the loss of that job came as a complete shock to me. Imagine with all those signs and signals going, all those dreams, all those behaviors at work, it came as a total shock. And it should not have. And frankly, would not have if I had been paying attention to the signs. All right? If I had been paying. Joseph Campbell, does that name ring a bell? The guy who helped popularize the hero's journey. He said, and this is his language, the great sacrilege in terms of the soul's integrity is what he called inadvertence. Inadvertence, meaning not paying attention, not being alert, not being awake, stumbling along and bumbling along and just simply not having the receiver turned on. Okay? Which is an acquired taste, because what it requires that you do is listen to the marching orders that you get when you turn it on. And this can sometimes be inconvenient at the best, all right, and scary and boat rocking, as Jonah taught us. But the fact is, especially now that I'm in this line of work, I get it, that our lives are continually sending signals out to us. Continually sending signals out to us. I mean the same way we send signals into outer space as part of the space program. All right? Because we're always hoping somebody is going to come across them and decipher them and trace the calls. All right? So these are signals that indicate the need for a change. All right? That indicate the arrival of a calling. That tell us what kind of course corrections or fine-tunings we need to make to stay true to true north. All right? If not true to the developmental imperatives of our lives. In other words, the fact that they change. See, I think that the great vocational question is not, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I'm amazed how many people my age I hear still using that phrase. It's not, what should I do with my life? I do a lot of engagements in the college setting. It's not, what major should I declare? I think the great vocational question is, who am I? Who am I should say. What is my true nature as distinct from everybody else's? Just, the furry warmth of the herd. And so our lives are... And, the ancient Romans used to have an interesting saying about this stuff. They said, the fates lead those who will. Those who won't, they drag. And I had to get dragged. All right. Although Campbell used to talk about this concept of what he called a directive crisis. A directive crisis, or some people call it falling up. All right. In this case, toward my true calling. which was freelance writing, which is a calling I had heard for half a decade before I actually did anything about it. Right? Before I lobbied the company that I worked for, which is called Gannett, to move from the newspaper I was at the time that the call began, which was the Cincinnati Enquirer, to USA Today when it was first born. They're both owned by the Gannett. And I lobbied hard to get there. So what I learned in retrospect is being at that job at all at USA Today was an elaborate form of avoidance that simply caught up with me. Right? But if it's any consolation, Campbell talks about this. Phase one of responding to a calling is running from it. It's inevitable. It's universal. And I say that by way of having compassion for ourselves if we find ourselves, or I should say when we find ourselves in the position of resisting a call. It's universal. All right? I'm thinking of one of the best descriptions I've ever run across of phase one. Anybody read The Hobbit by Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings? Well, there's a scene in there where Bilbo Baggins is sitting peacefully in his house in the Shire smoking a pipe, and he gets a on the front door. And it's the wizard Gandalf who says, "I'm looking for somebody to share an adventure." And Bilbo Baggins' response to that, classic phase one, he says, "Oh, no, we're just plain quiet village folk. We have no use for adventures." He says, "Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things make you late for dinner." Stage one. Okay, so again, if it's any consolation. So, by the way, I'm defining a calling really broadly, secularly, okay? These are simply the signs and the signals, the urgings, the promptings that you get throughout the course of your life. Again, even the imperatives that come from deep inside your life that tell you what it's going to take to stay true to true north. All right? That's kind of how I'm really defining it. And frankly, I think that these signs and these signals that we're getting, that I'm calling callings, they come throughout life. Our life is continually asking us to reinvent ourselves, really from beginning to end, and stay as close as possible to our sense of passion and aliveness and whatever decisions it takes to stay in that place. And they're also continually reminding us, I would add, that we each have a use-by date. Okay? We just don't know what it is. You know, and I think we intuitively understand this, that the older we get, the more the sense of urgency is turned up. Does that sound familiar? And the less and less viable postponement is, you know, of our passions and our gifts and our callings. I saw a bumper sticker a couple of years ago that said, "Warning, dates in calendar are closer than they appear." So, and you know, frankly, the kind of authenticity that I'm talking about, that I think callings point us toward, is not even something we need to discover or learn or go out on a pilgrimage to find, as much as half the time it's something we just need to remember. I think in a lot of cases that these calls are something we've known all along, sometimes since we were children, and then forgotten. All right? So when I was researching the Callings book, one of the things that I ran across in my research was a college biology textbook. And there was a passage in there that absolutely leapt out at me. And it was a description of what happens in a fertilized human egg and what happens to it as it grows and develops. And the passage said that very early on in that process, these little indentations appear in the round cell ball that begin the process of distinguishing one side of you from the other. The head from the hindquarters, okay? Distinction that seems to be lost entirely on some people, even 40 years after they're fertilized. But what it said is that if you were at this point in the game, if you were to take a single cell from the head and mechanically move it down to the hindquarters, it would migrate back up. And what the book said is it knows what it's supposed to become. Imagine how that would strike you if you were researching a book about authenticity and callings. So I thought, wow, at a cellular level, I think we know what we're supposed to become. In fact, anymore when I hear people use this kind of language, I feel it in my bones, I feel it in my cells, I feel it in my gut, I feel it in, the very fiber of my being. Anymore, I think maybe they're talking literally. That's how it strikes me these days. And there was a guy that I included in the book. He's an artist who lives out in California, named Howard Ikemoto. And he described an interaction that he had one day with his 7-year-old daughter. She came to him and asked him, Daddy, what do you do at work? And he said, well, I work at the college, and my job is to teach people how to draw. And he said that she looked back at him incredulous and said, Daddy, you mean they forget? Imagine how that would strike a 7-year-old, that anybody could possibly forget how to draw. It's like forgetting how to dream or something, right? But we do forget. We do forget, all right? And when I was interviewing people for the book, one of the things that kept jumping out at me was how many of those people told me they had a practice of some kind. The whole point of it was to strike up a conversation with their own lives on an ongoing basis. Some self-reflective practice. That was absolutely key to discerning what their calls were. Again, the willingness to turn the receiver on and hear what you hear. Okay? So, daily journaling, meditation, for some people, therapy, counseling is a self-reflective practice. I would say dream interpretation was really common. Regular short retreats, regular intimate conversation. Your participation in any kind of group whose members get together for the primary purpose of waking up. All right? So I just wanted to share that jumped out at me. All right? And not only that, but when you begin these kind of self-reflective practices, you begin to understand that callings come in a lot of different forms. A lot of different forms. I ran across a poet named Wallace Stevens who said, I don't ask for the full ringing of the bell. I don't ask for a clap of thunder. A scrawny cry will do. And I love that. To me, that's like the heart of what spiritual communities call discernment. Okay? Is the scrawny cries approach. Because so many people, and I see this a lot in my line of work, they're waiting and waiting for like this experience. The clouds to part, the sun to shine, maybe the bony finger of God. And they're missing all the smaller calls that are right at their feet. You know what I'm saying? And which are kind of the fire drills for the bigger ones. Because calls come in a really impressive variety of forms. And it just pays to really kind of post sentries at the various gates. All right? Because calls come as intuitions. An intuition is like clinically a little calling. They come as gifts. They come as things you're passionate about. They come as things that make you angry or indignant or righteous. Right? They come as dreams. All the religions of the world seem to agree with this. Dreams are one of the primary channels through which the gods and the goddesses talk to the mortals. Right? Any of you remember a novelist named Tom Robbins? Another roadside attraction, even Cowgirls Get the Blues, all these marvelous, quirky novels. He said, dreams don't come true. They are true. When we talk about our dreams coming true, we're actually talking about our ambitions. It's a whole different story. All right? And there was an incredible study that I saw in Time magazine about 12 years ago that corroborated this idea. It came out of Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And what they did is they studied pregnant women. And they found that of the women who had an intuition about the gender of their baby, They were correct 71% of the time, which actually impressed me just all by itself. But of the women in that study who had a dream about the gender of their baby, they were correct 100% of the time. Yeah, I mean, what does that say? We have access to really deep knowledge in there, and we're sleeping through it most of the time. You know? So calls come, and this is the level at which I encourage people to look at the calls in their lives. And in fact, will in the workshop this afternoon. This is the level. Calls come through things like song lyrics you can't get out of your head for weeks. Right? You know, any of you ever run across a novelist named Ann Tyler? She wrote The Accidental Tourist, which is how most people know her work because it was made into a movie with William Hurt. But she's a brilliant observer of the dynamics between partners. She says, I can always tell what my husband is really thinking by the tunes that he absent-mindedly hums in the car. So, gentlemen, take note. You know, because I'm in the mood for love is really different than tied to the whipping post. So, but these are the kind of subtleties, the scrawny cries, all right? Calls come through things like a decision that needs to be made in your life now, not backburnered another year. You know what I'm saying? Some issue that's hanging over your head, waiting for resolution. That's a calling, right? They come through the patterns that have established themselves in your life by this point in time. You know what I'm saying? Like you've worn a footpath to and from some issue, like a lesson you've endlessly had to learn, or a kind of mistake you continually make, or kind of partner you always attract, or getting fired again, or I mean, even just a section of the bookstore you always walk into first when you walk into a bookstore. There's callings embedded in those patterns, all right? So it pays to kind of unpack them a little. Calls come through, where is there friction in your life? Where's there friction? Because it's like in the natural world. Friction happens where changes are trying to take place or are taking place, right? Where does head argue with heart all the time? There's a call in that drama. Where does, like passion bump up against security? There's a call in there. Where does walk not quite match talk even? Where do you fight with people? What are you fighting for? All right? And callings definitely come through the body. I've got an entire chapter in the callings book called The Language of the Body, because the word symptom means a sign. Of what? The word pathology means the logic of pain. What's the logic? Even if it's psychologic, what's the logic? Right? And there was a guy that I interviewed for that chapter. His name is Arnold Mindell. And he started something called process-oriented psychology. And he's a brilliant body-mind guy. Okay? He said, during that interview, he said, symptoms are usually dreams trying to come true. Yeah, I'd never heard anything like that myself at the time. Symptoms are dreams trying to come true? And then what happened is a week later, I got it. Because I went to a writers' conference in Albuquerque. And after my presentation, I'm out in the lobby chatting with people. And this woman walks up to me out of the crowds, a complete stranger to me, walks up and says, one of those things that people won't typically say to you unless they're pretty sure they're never going to see you again. She just walked up to me and goes, hey, you know why I'm so fat? Which is not a question you're supposed to answer. And before I could even gather my wits, she answered it. She said, it's because I have so many stories inside of me I'm not writing down. That's her language. So many stories inside of me I'm not writing down. And I'll tell you, there is no science or philosophy I'm aware of that could dispute a self-diagnosis delivered with that kind of certainty. You know what I'm saying? The woman knew her body was trying to tell her something. She apparently knew exactly what it was. Right? She needed to be writing. She understood that her symptom, in the sense that it was a sign, meant something. She knew exactly what it meant. Really, it was the mark of Jonah. It's really what it was. It was the mark of Jonah. It was the evidence of her flight from a calling. And one, as she put it, that is pushing out from inside of me. Isn't that fascinating? People's language, the things that they reveal through their language. So, a couple of more things. All of the signs, all the signals, all these wonderful channels through which our callings make their way to us, really useful unless they can't get through. And callings have a tough time getting through when they get nothing but busy signals. You know what I'm saying? And I just want to address this for a minute here, because I'm aware that I'm addressing a modern, technologically advanced civilization, that sometimes has a hard time not being distracted by busyness and social media and all this stuff. I just want to share this. I saw a story in The New Yorker recently that was written by a guy named Adam Gopnik. And he was describing his 3-year-old daughter has an imaginary playmate named Charlie Ravioli. And this is what you would Google if you wanted to read the story, because it's really a heck of a commentary on the culture that we've created. So what he's saying is that there's nothing unusual about a 3-year-old having an imaginary playmate, except this one is always too busy to play with her. She is calling up Charlie Ravioli on her toy cell phone and always having to leave him messages. A month later, her father discovers she's leaving messages with somebody named Lori. He says, "Honey, who's Lori?" And in her 3-year-old fashion, she explains, "This is Charlie Ravioli's assistant." This is somebody he's apparently hired to return his phone calls for him. And, maybe I'm being overly sensitive or something, but when our 3-year-olds' imaginary playmates are too busy to play with them and start hiring agents, for crying out loud, to fend off the insistent phone calls of the children who imagine them to begin with, I'm just thinking it's time to move out of New York. Move to Hawaii, or rearrange your priorities or something. Because the compulsion toward busyness is a pretty good definition of workaholism. Experts just call it a process addiction instead of a substance addiction, right? And it's one of our very few socially sanctioned addictions, right? And one of the very few that you could put on your resume. As you may be aware, you can't do that with most addictions, right? You can't do that. So I just wanted to share this. And my point is that even if all of your works are good works, even if all of your busyness is in the service of worthy and noble causes and callings, I just think that when the means to those ends is an addictive process, I think the end result is ultimately a loss of soul, right? Kind of a depletion of spirit. All right, so I'm gonna wind up with this. I used to be a reporter also, as I mentioned, for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And I think one of my favorite stories that I ever wrote in the years that I was there was a story about the circus coming to town. All right, this is Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And I went down to the train tracks to meet them because they used to travel around on a train. And in a fit of journalistic zeal and therefore short-sightedness, I let the animal trainer of Ringling Brothers convince me that riding bareback on an elephant at the head of the Barnum and Bailey Circus Parade through downtown would add color to my story. So contrary to my Jungle Book fantasy about how you get up on an elephant, this is literally what I thought was going to happen. I was going to step onto its trunk and be airlifted up onto its back. That's the image I had in my mind. Well, the only way to actually get up on the elephant was to use a plain old aluminum ladder. And the only way to stay up there during the parade, he instructed me, was to hang onto the elephant's ears. Okay? So those of you who have ridden bareback on elephants probably know about this already. But elephant ears have a really unpleasant habit of flapping a lot, especially when they're hot, and it was high summer, and we're talking elephant ear flapping here, you know. I mean, this is not kitty cat twitching, you know. And so the only way to stay up there during the parade was to remain extremely flappable. Otherwise, I'd have been thrown, and it was, 15 feet to the ground, and in front of everybody. And you have to picture, I'm the first thing anybody saw in that parade. For one thing, I'm wearing my business clothes. Well, he sprung this on me at the last second, and so I'm wearing my business clothes. My pants are scrunched up above my knees. It was just with the black socks. It was just a fashion tragedy. And so when I look back, and by the way, I'm pretty sure I did not capture the theme of the show. Ringling Brothers, the greatest show on earth. Pretty sure I captured another one of P.T. Barnum's famous themes, though. There's a sucker born every minute. I think I got that one. But when I look back at that experience and what I've learned since then about what's involved in following a calling, that experience has a lot in common with it. In the sense that I was caught by surprise and carried off by something much bigger than me. Okay? It was nerve-wracking and thrilling simultaneously, and that the elephant couldn't have cared less. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I've discovered over and over again throughout life a kind of an unsettling truth, which is that my soul doesn't actually seem to care what price I have to pay to follow my callings. I hate this. This seems like a design flaw to me, frankly. It seems like it ought to care, but my happiness, my security, my popularity, my vanity don't seem to matter to it. It's not interested in whether I live a comfortable life. It's not interested in whether I become rich and famous. Not even interested in whether people like me. But what does seem to matter, and I've also discovered this repeatedly, is hanging on to the elephant. That does seem to matter. In other words, the willingness to go for the ride. The big ride. The one that ensures that someday, if your life happens to be flashing in front of your eyes, at the very least, it will hold your interest. That much at least. So I just want to say in closing that in the spirit of helping to ensure that it does hold your interest, I just want to say that the workshop this afternoon, 12:30 to 3:30, is a very hands-on opportunity. It's not lecture format. It's a hands-on opportunity to explore what your own life is calling for from you at this juncture. What it's calling for. Really the question we're going to have is what wants to emerge right now in your life? In any arena. It could be vocational or non-vocational. But what wants to emerge? What's trying to happen? So I hope you'll come. And thank you again, Marty, so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Did I tell you? It's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's just anchor all of that in prayer. We take a moment to give thanks. Personally, I'm so blessed by this community and all that comprises who we are and what we do. I'm grateful for Gregg and his insights and wisdoms as we listen to those divine promptings. So I'm just giving thanks in this moment for this entire community and what is seeking its emergence through us and as us. And I speak the word of truth for each person gathered here, knowing that there is a wholeness and a wisdom and a divine design unfolding. So we speak the word of wholeness, knowing that health and well-being are revealed. We speak the word of abundance, knowing that we live in the divine flow, joyously giving, graciously receiving of this divine bounty. We speak the word of love, knowing that we are always in the presence, and so we fully and freely forgive ourselves and those who we perceive to have harmed us, so that we might experience the brotherhood and sisterhood of all humanity. So I am grateful to speak and live these words of truth. I am grateful for this community. We are blessed, and I am grateful for all that is unfolding through us. We extend that blessing not only to this community, but to the community in which we live. We allow it to expand to our brothers and sisters across the planet. We're holding a vision for a planet at peace and a world that works for all. And as always, I bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of all faiths, for I know there are many pathways to the divine. Therefore, we honor and celebrate them all. How good it is to listen to the divine promptings. And how good it is to have the wisdom and the courage to follow divine guidance. It is a blessing. So for this, and so much more, I'm simply giving thanks as we allow it to be so. And together we say, and so it is. Amen.
Okay, Unity of Charlotte, we got some good news for you. Just get ready for the good times to roll, cause we're gonna make it. Come on in, put your hands together.
Don't worry about today. We'll find a way. We're gonna make it. We might not see the road for the rain, but we're gonna make it. We may not see the master plan and the weight, it makes it so hard to stand. As long as you and I are together, oh, we're gonna make it.
We may be in high tide, but God provides. Oh, we're gonna make it. I know we will. But as long as we're standing side by side, we're gonna make it. I know we will. Take charities, a state of mind. Leave all thought of lack behind. I'm rich in love, and you know we'll be fine. Oh, we're gonna make it.
I know we will. The future is great. No need to wait. We're gonna make it.
And soon we can move to higher state, cause we're gonna make it.
I know we will.
So just imagine that great big pot of gold that's overflowing and all you can hold. It's in your heart
And here in your soul,
we're gonna make
it.
So
We're gonna make it, yeah. We're gonna make it. Oh.
make it. Oh, yes, we will.
But as long as we're standing side by side, we're gonna make it.
I know we will. But as long as we're standing side by side, we're gonna make it. I know we will. Cause prosperity's a state of mind. Leave all thoughts
We're gonna make it.
behind.
We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. Yeah.
Awesome. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Good job. We're going to make it. So remember that woman that almost threw up on her shoes the first time we made her come up on stage? Remember her? She looks remarkable similar to you, my friend. So to recap, Gregg will be available. He's if you'd like his books, he'll be available. Carolyn can check in on the workshop, or if you want to sign up for that, she can assist you. Healing and Wholeness in the Unity Room, lunch for the workshop people in the Innes Room, coffee for anybody that wants it in that room. Give somebody 3 hugs before you leave here today, and let us. You know what? I'm in the mood. I'm in a mood. Let's do the something magnificent, if you don't mind. Okay. So I invite you to stand, follow me, kind of do what I do. I can do it with one hand. You can do 2. Something magnificent is happening through me right now.
Something magnificent is happening through me right now.
It is happening through my mind.
It is happening through my mind.
Through my body.
Through my body.
Through my affairs.
Through my affairs.
I think it.
I think it.
I believe it.
I believe
I
it.
accept it.
I accept
I
it.
rejoice in it.
Rejoice in
I
it.
name it good and very good.
I name it good and very good.
Thank you, God.
Thank you, God.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Let us sing the peace song.